We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamonn Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamonn. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamonn Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, one of Britain's most recognisable politicians as you've never seen him before.
I think some people might have thought that you were the strict one.
No, I give in straight away before being asked, really. I'm a complete pushover.
We lift the veil on a Conservative heavyweight and GB News' latest star signing.
So you don't own a pair of jeans?
What would I do with a pair of jeans?
Tune in to Dan Wootton tonight for an exclusive sit-down with the real Jacob Rees-Mogg, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m, only on GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, slippery Starmer has set out 5 vapid Blairite missions for Britain. But on a day where Labour's leader is making bold political promises, don't forget the bloke changes his mind every time he opens his mouth.
I'm 100% behind Jeremy Corbyn.
Jeremy Corbyn will not stand for Labour at the next general election.
I will unleash on the king of the flip-flop in my digest next. Then my superstar panel give their view. Joining me tonight, Dominic Samuels, Sean Bailey and Amy Nicol. Also coming up, Boris Johnson has made a potentially groundbreaking intervention on the Brexit betrayal tonight.
You support any deal that he does on Brexit and Northern Ireland?
Well, I think the best thing is to continue with the Northern Ireland bill that we agreed.
So, with Britain's Brexit delivering PM making his position crystal clear, will Fishy Rishi fail to make the next general election if he undermines democracy? Ex-Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe analyses that big witty style. Also coming up as the government plans to fast-track 12,000 immigration applications, including for Channel migrants. Are Brits' concerns over mass migration still being ignored? Calvin McKenzie gives his no-nonsense take on this effective asylum amnesty in Uncancelled later. With the authoritarian publishers of Roald Dahl doubling down on their vandalism of the great author's work, Camilla has stepped up as the anti-woke queen the country so desperately needs.
Remain true to your calling, unimpeded by those who may wish to curb the freedom of your expression or impose limits on your imagination.
But was the Queen Consort right to weigh in, and do more influential public figures need to join her in defending free speech? We'll debate that in the media buzz. Plus, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier get stuck into Ben Wallace's stinging criticism of Prince Harry's Taliban kill-count revelation. I'll find out what the Defence Secretary had to say when my royal masterminds join me live shortly. And on the eve of joining GB News, one of the country's most famous and unique political leaders gives his most personal interview ever.
Children have me wrapped around their little finger.
Do they?
Absolutely. I give in.
So you're the soft dad?
I give in the whole time, yes.
And does she need to be the authoritarian?
No, Nanny gives in you almost as quickly as I do. There's not much.
My unmissable exclusive at home with the irrepressible Jacob Rees-Mogg, where he'll reveal the man behind the political caricature. As Guardian, Foghorn Owen Jones demands the UK brings Shamima Begum home while reminding us that slippery Starmer backtracked on repatriating the terrorist. Are the left endangering Britons with their extreme open borders policy? Both sides will battle it out over Begum in the clash. As always, our first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages and a new Greatest Britain and Union jackass coming up too. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. Good evening to you. I've got a little audience tonight. This is very exciting for me. I've got to tell you, I am off for the next 2 weeks because I'm turning 40. And look who I have with me. This is my mum, Mary, my dad, John, my sister, Ashley, and my beautiful niece, Ivy Dan, who I just adore with all of my heart. And it's really interesting, actually. Jacob Rees-Mogg, in the interview we've got coming up, we're talking about family and the importance of family. And obviously, we come from vastly different backgrounds. But he said, actually, for me, it's nothing to do with money or privilege. Everything with family is to do with love. And I love my family so much. They have been here for me over 4 decades now. They have to put up with all of the flack that comes from being Dan Wootton's mother, father and sister, and I love them very much for it. It's so exciting to have them here today. And forgive me for not being here the next fortnight, but I'm going to be with them. But before we kick off the show tonight, the news with Aaron Armstrong.
Good evening, I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The former Hollywood film producer Harvey Weinstein has been sentenced to 16 additional years in prison after being found guilty of rape and sexual assault in LA. Weinstein is already serving a 23-year sentence for a separate conviction in New York, which is under appeal. The jury in the Los Angeles case convicted Weinstein on charges against a single victim known as Jane Doe, who says the incident happened when Weinstein appeared uninvited at her hotel room during a film festival in 2013. The film mogul maintains the allegations against him were a setup. Disgraced singer R. Kelly's been sentenced to an additional year in prison on top of the 30 years he's serving for an earlier conviction. He's received a 20-year jail term on charges relating to child enticement and producing indecent images of children. Almost all of that will be served simultaneously alongside his previous sentence. In June last year, Kelly was sentenced to 30 years in prison after being convicted on racketeering and prostitution charges. He'll be eligible for release around the age of 80. 3 men have been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder following the shooting of a high-ranking officer in Omagh. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell was targeted by 2 masked gunmen while he was with his son at a sports centre in County Tyrone last night. He's in a critical but stable condition in hospital. Police say dissident group, the new IRA, is the primary focus, and they're now reviewing the threat level. In the last half an hour or so, the United Nations General Assembly has overwhelmingly chosen to isolate Russia, voting for lasting peace in Ukraine. The UN has once again demanded Russia withdraw its troops. The non-binding resolution was passed by 141 votes to 7, with 32 abstentions, which included China. Now, its president, the Ukraine's president, that is, has paid tribute to all those who've died since the war began. It is the eve of the first anniversary of Russia's invasion at the moment, and tomorrow the US president is due to meet Volodymyr Zelensky and G7 leaders virtually, as well as announce a new wave of sanctions against Moscow. Several nations are holding vigils this evening in tribute to Ukraine. Paris's Eiffel Tower has been lit up in the colours of the Ukrainian flag, while in London, hundreds of people have gathered in Trafalgar Square to pay their respects, with Defence Secretary Ben Wallace and actress Helen Mirren among those giving speeches. 1 minute silence will be held across the nation at 11 a.m. tomorrow. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it is back to Dan Wootton tonight.
Trusting a policy pledge from slippery Starmer is like believing in the sincerity of Jeremy Corbyn celebrating Hanukkah. But today, the man who is coasting towards the Prime Ministership, even though it's impossible to know what he really believes about anything other than winning, launched 5 Weasley and actually pretty meaningless missions. Essentially, this was the new version of Ed Miliband's disastrous Ed Stone. So here they are. Secure the highest sustained growth in the G7, make Britain a clean energy superpower with zero carbon electricity by 2030, accelerating the rush to net zero, build an NHS fit for the future, make Britain's streets safe, break down the barriers to opportunity at every stage. So it's as vague can be, no timelines, no specifics other than on the economically ruinous march to net zero, and not a single mention of the invasion of our southern border or out-of-control immigration, a clear concession that Labour's open borders ethos remains alive and well. Oh, and he's already conceded defeat by saying all of this could not even be achieved in one term anyway.
Also honest enough to say that some of these issues are not going to be fixed within 5 years. They're longer term than that. I don't think it'll come as a surprise to anyone that some of these issues are going to be longer term. That's why we've said a decade of national renewal.
But the bigger point is an issue of trust. How can we believe Keir Starmer believes in these pledges and will implement them when time and time again, from Brexit to Corbyn to Begum to his lefty leadership pledges, the man has said what he needs for political expediency at the time, only to reverse course later?
100% behind Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn will not stand for Labour at the next general election as a Labour Party candidate. Our options must include campaigning for a public vote, and nobody is ruling out Remain as an option. I've said on a number of occasions that we are not going back to the EU.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said.
For the vast majority of women, this is all about biology, and of course they don't have a penis. We all know that.
Climate change is the issue of our time, and as the Extinction Rebellion protest showed us this week, the next generation are not going to forgive us if we don't take action.
Get up, go home. I'm opposed to what you're doing. It's not the way to deal with the climate crisis, and that's why we wanted longer sentences for those that are gluing themselves and stuck on roads. The decision by the Home Secretary was the wrong decision, and I think it was a rushed decision.
I want to ask you about Shamima Begum. In 2019, you said stripping her of her British citizenship was the wrong decision. She's lost her appeal to regain it. Should she be allowed to appeal again?
I think the court decision yesterday is the right decision. National security has to come first.
No wonder the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, decided to rewrite Starmer's missions this week.
No, but the Honourable Gentleman talks about his plans. We have heard that tomorrow he's going to announce 5 missions. But we already know what they are. It's uncontrolled immigration, it's reckless spending, it's higher debt, and it's softer sentences. And for the fifth pledge, Mr. Speaker, we all know it's that he reserves the right to change his mind on the other 4.
Even the British-bashing corporation couldn't stomach another set of lies from the opposition leader on the Today programme this morning.
You abandoned many of the pledges you made when you ran for leader, so why should people trust you?
Well, look, so far as the pledges when I ran for leader are concerned, they are important statements of value and principle over the last 2 or 3 years across the country.
I'm so sorry, you just answered the question by asking a new question. You spent years advocating for him to be Prime Minister.
Well, look, every single member of the Labour Party campaign for a Labour government at the next election. There's nobody's going to say that's vague, that's
but how are you going to do
something
it?
that's easily achievable. Just let me finish on the missions, and I'll come straight to your point. The mission needs to be ambitious. It needs to...
Obviously, I mean, everyone who wants to be Prime Minister is going to say we've got to be ambitious as a country. I mean, that's literally verbiage.
Starmer spent years campaigning for Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister. He spent years campaigning for a second referendum on Brexit to undermine the biggest democratic mandate in British history. He lied to his party about a hard left programme only to reverse course the moment he secured the leadership. His missions are meaningless because Starmer cares about one thing and one thing only: securing power and then doing what the hell the globalist political establishment tells him to do. Be warned. To respond now, my superstar panel. Political commentator Dominique Samuels, the top Tory Sean Bailey, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicol. Sean Bailey, how can we trust any of these missions?
I think the challenge...
Flip-flopping Chief Starmer.
The challenge he's going to have is about authenticity. Do people believe this? People will remember he staunchly backed Corbyn. He didn't back the Labour Party, he backed Corbyn, and the minute Corbyn was removed, he backed out of backing Corbyn. And he gave all of these pledges, but where's the detail? I think what Keir Starmer's shown is he actually hasn't been in politics that long, and the more he speaks, the more risk he's having to take. And now that he's given these pledges, people are going to say, fine, where's the detail? You talk about net zero, you talk about wind power, sounds fine. Who's going to pay for that?
Well, indeed.
Yeah, people's experience of that has been really high energy
Dominic,
bills.
actually, the only specifics today were on net zero, which to me means actually Labour is going to ruin us financially before they even try and recover the country.
Yeah.
Because if they're trying to do this net zero shtick by 2030, we are finished, Dominic.
Yeah, I think that was the most sinister pledge in my mind, that he wants to make Britain a zero carbon superpower. I mean, that's a pretty rubbish thing to be a superpower of. But by 2030, he even admitted that the people he'd spoken to were really quite sceptical of this plan, because what will it mean? It will mean higher taxes for people and a rise in prices in general, probably a rise in our energy prices, although he claims that it will bring them down. And also, I think what's concerning is that all of the other major growing economies have said that they're not actually going to go along with this net zero stuff. Pakistan have said they're not going to do it.
One mission is going to destroy the other mission, right? Because he says he wants to be the fastest growing country in the G7. Well, I'm sorry, mission 3 to be net zero by 2030 is immediately going to make that impossible.
And
that's just a fact.
Exactly, and that's why economies like China's economy are not going as fast at this as we are, which says to me that he's not actually that serious about making our economy as strong as it could be.
Well, Amy, the other thing is, right, it's like, oh, no, I'm not going to do this in 5 years. He's going to need 2 terms.
Yeah, that shows how confident he can be because of the leads that he's got in the polls at the moment. He is going to be Prime Minister, and he's going to be Prime Minister for 2 terms. It's just going to happen, isn't it?
I think what it actually shows, he's pre-prepared his excuse. You know, imagine 2 or 3 years in, we've had but we're not the fastest growing economy. He will just turn around and say, I gave a 10-year window.
Amy, were you inspired by these missions? Because, as I say, other than net zero, right, it was a bunch of vagaries. It was a bunch of Blairite rubbish, but at least Blair, in 97, with his credit cards, I mean, they were very specific pledges, you know, reduce classroom sizes. It was very specific. This is just like, make the NHS better, make our economy better. It's meaningless mumbo-jumbo.
I mean, they could have been Tory pledges, really. It wasn't...
Well, they're the same thing these days, aren't they?
It did kind of all blur into one. I would have liked to have seen rejoin the single market, free childcare, ditch Rwanda immediately, specific pledges that we can hold on to.
We've got to talk about
that's
borders
inspired.
for a moment, Sean, because, look, you know I've criticised the Sunak administration for a number of reasons. But at the end of the day, at least he genuinely does want to stop the boats. It is one of his top 5 priorities for the country. Starmer, not a word about the invasion of our southern border today. Not a word. I believe a Labour administration would mean a return to open borders.
What you're seeing is the pressure that Starmer's on. People on the left have spoken about very open borders. He cannot speak against that and still retain their support. So, therefore, he decided not to mention it at all. But what he has to remember, he has to win the whole country. And if you can't provide a plan for that, the country won't back you. And where his real problem lies is anybody who talks about immigration, illegal or immigrants or whatever it is, asylum seekers, is branded as racist. So it means now he's cut himself off from a large part of the electorate. He's going to have to find a way of speaking to those people without accusing them of being racist, and that's going to be tricky.
Yeah, because they're not going away. I mean, we've seen protests, we've seen demonstrations, they've got heated. People are concerned about this. It's not going to go away.
However, Labour have been clear about their strategy going forward.
They haven't been clear.
They certainly have. They've talked about opening safe and legal routes. They've been doing that throughout the...
My question is, what safe and legal routes have been closed?
So at the
Genuinely.
moment, you can only take certain countries, right?
Yeah, they're talking about
Homes
open
for
borders.
Ukraine,
But let's just be clear.
Afghanistan. So if you're from a certain part of Africa, you have no way of seeking
Amy
refuge.
is correct. They have been clear that they're going to open those routes. But what they need to explain to people is, what does that mean? Does it mean more or less immigration?
Of course, and we know.
Yeah.
More.
Sean Bailey, Dominic Samuels, Amy DeCam, my superstar panel, are with me all night. But our royal masterminds are still to come too. And with Defence Secretary Ben Wallace slamming Prince Harry's boasting over his Taliban kill count, should the government have more of a say on the fate of the runaway prince? Lady C and Phil Dampier up soon. But first in the clash, actress and presenter Jenny Barnett goes up against commentator and former aide to Maggie Thatcher, Niall Gardner, on whether lefties like Owen Jones are endangering Britain with their extreme open borders policy, and the fact that they want to return Shamima Begum to Britain now. Let me know what you think. Email me down at gbnews.uk. Our poll running there too. We're back in just a moment.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News.
Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Stand by for my royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier. But first, it's The Clash. And common sense prevailed yesterday as Shamima Begum was denied entry back into the UK with the ISIS bride's bid to regain citizenship was thwarted on security grounds for now, even though her legal team have vowed to fight on. But we should never forget that Slippery Starmer and his attack dog, Emily Thornberry, wanted to bring the terrorists back, putting British lives in danger.
Starmer could then have said, well, what about a prevention order which limits what an individual can do back in this country? So actually, had the interest of the child been taken properly into account, I think we would see that this was a wrong decision and a rushed decision by the Home Secretary.
I think that the best thing to have done with Shamima Begum would have been to bring her back to Britain and make her face charges for the crimes that she's obviously committed.
Appallingly, most of the left are still advocating for that to happen, which would open the doors for a flood of other jihadists to enter the country. Well, socialist pipsqueak Owen Jones made an impassioned plea for Shamima's return because it's, quote, the reasonable thing to do.
Bring Begum home, try her here, find out exactly what happened and stop it from happening again. That is the reasonable position, I think, to have. And I don't think it's giving succour to her crimes or what she did to say, hold her accountable as a British citizenship.
What do you think? Should Shamima Begum be allowed back to the UK? Let me know your thoughts by emailing dan at gbnews.uk. Tweet me at gbnews and I'll bring you those results shortly. But to debate this now, I'm joined by the actress and broadcaster Jenny Barnett and the Conservative commentator, former aide to Margaret Thatcher, Niall Gardner. So, Niall, Owen Jones says it's the reasonable thing to bring Shamima back to the country. What do you think?
Well, Dan, thanks for having me on the show today. I have to say that Owen Jones really is living in some kind of parallel universe if he thinks it's reasonable to bring a figure like this who's run off and joined ISIS, who has no right, frankly, to return to the United Kingdom. It's insanity, I think, to suggest that she has the right to British citizenship still, that she has the right to return to the United Kingdom. She belongs, frankly, in the Syrian camp where she is right now. She has betrayed her own country. She ran off to join a brutal, monstrous Islamist terrorist organization. This idea of bringing her back to the United Kingdom is complete and utter folly. I think it's very offensive, really, to all the victims of ISIS terrorism. And yet again, I think Owen Jones is speaking complete and utter nonsense.
Yeah, it's interesting, though, isn't it, Niall? Because until today, Starmer said Begum should be back in the country too. And we should never forget that if Starmer were Prime Minister, Begum would be back in the country. And that also means, Niall, we would have had 160 other jihadis back in the country too. And I think that's why the Labour government poses such a security threat.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, you know, Keir Starmer is a complete flip-flopper. And not long ago, of course, he was defending the right of jihadists to come back to the United Kingdom. Do we want to have these Islamist jihadists running around the UK posing a security threat? We certainly do not. We have to have secure borders, and we have to take very firm and decisive action against those who have betrayed their country, those who pose a significant security threat to the British people.
Jenny Barnett, you strongly disagree. Do you think it's the reasonable thing, though, for Begum to come back? Because it doesn't feel reasonable to me.
I think it's humane. I don't think either of you are taking into account who this girl is.
Oh, I am.
No. Brought up in Bethnal Green. Her father, yes, is Bangladeshi. Bangladesh says she does not have dual citizenship. Were she to go out there, they would execute her. She is the daughter of a single woman from Bethnal Green, and she was radicalised. And she was groomed. And she was trafficked. And she was taken out to that place.
No, she wasn't. She chose to go. What are you talking about, Jenny? This was a very intelligent student who, with her friends, conspired to go and join the Islamic State. By the way, Jenny, after they had started beheading Brits, beheading British aid workers, she decided to go there after that. Who trafficked her? What are you talking about?
I'm not defending certain aspects of who she is, but she's a British citizen. And today, it was quoted today that foreign governments have brought back families of ISIS terrorists, recognising their constitutional rights, as well as implicitly admitting that such people are their responsibility. We're not doing that. A humane, mature position eludes this government who prefer to demonise and fearmonger. Everybody deserves to have somebody stand up on their behalf and fight for them. Who's going to do it for this girl? No, she should not, Niall, be wandering around in a North Syrian camp. She's 23. She needs to stand up. She needs to be tried. She needs to learn.
But she won't be tried. Niall, isn't that the issue? She won't be tried in this country because, actually, we don't have the evidence for the crimes that she committed in Raqqa, including, by the way, sewing on the vests of suicide bombers.
Yeah, exactly. It would be very, very difficult, actually, to put her on trial in the United Kingdom. She is not actually a British citizen anymore. She lost that right several years ago. So she's not a British citizen. I think let's point out the reality of that fact here. And I think someone who runs off to join one of the most evil, barbaric organizations known to man does not have the right to some kind of trial here in the United Kingdom here. That's absolutely ridiculous. The priority, as the Home Secretary has made clear, Suella Braverman made clear, the priority is to protect the British people, defend the national security of the United Kingdom.
Indeed. And Jenny, I want you to respond specifically to that point, because what Niall is saying is correct. MI5, Jenny, still say that Shamima Begum poses a threat to British national security. So why do folk like you believe that you know better than them?
I not believe I know best. I find this confusing. I find it heartbreaking. The first question that comes to mind is she had 3 children, they all died. She's 15, yeah. She's been manipulated. She's become a manipulator. We are now in a situation we will never know the truth. And the question that comes to my mind is, if you believe or do not believe in any kind of God, who a magnanimity has to take place, where we have to be looking, I wrote down 3 words, we have to have tolerance, forgiveness and compassion.
Okay, Jenny, think about this. Think about this. It has been reported by the Daily Telegraph this week that, Jenny, just hear me out and I'll let you respond. It has been reported by the Daily Telegraph this week that more Brits are now returning to Syria to join terrorist organisations. What message do you think it sends to young teenagers potentially sitting in Bethnal Green tonight thinking about going down the Shamima Begum path if they know that we are a soft touch as a country where if it doesn't go well over with the terrorist organisation, they will be allowed back to this country? Think about that.
That's what I'm saying. If the child, she's young, if that young woman were to be stood in a dock, don't shake your head.
She's 23.
Yeah, if she is tried legitimately over here, then she stands and we see somebody who has to see the error of her ways. But what we're doing is we're wiping the floor. Nobody wants to know. And so the left are demonised and then the right are demonised. Nobody is coming together. And I think security challenges are changing and society has to move on. We should not be saber rattling. We have to be more humane. And our decisions have to reflect that.
That's the actress and the broadcaster, Jenny Barnett, and before that, the Conservative commentator, Niall Gardner. So who do you agree with? Is letting Shamima Begum back into the UK actually the reasonable thing to do, as Owen Jones believes? From Tony on Twitter, I think we need to take responsibility for her, bring her back and lock her up. From Ducan on Twitter, no, the courts have ruled that her return could pose a significant threat to our country's security and we should not question that. And Angie says the Manchester bombing victims and the beheaded charity workers won't come home, so she can stay in her beloved Syria. And your verdict is now in. Just 10% of you agree with Jenny Barnett. that letting Shamima Begum back into the UK is the reasonable thing to do. 90% of you disagree with that Owen Jones statement. A statement, by the way, backed up by Keir Starmer until today, which I think we shouldn't forget. Coming up, as Boris Johnson lays into Rishi Sunak over Northern Ireland protocol negotiations, could the PM be gone before the next election if he undermines Brexit? Well, former Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe, she was, of course, a Brexit Party MEP as well, is going to join me for Big Witty Style very shortly. But first, with Defence Minister Ben Wallace wading into Prince Harry's Taliban kill count row and Lady Susan Hussey rightfully restored to royal duties, there's plenty for our royal masterminds to get their teeth into tonight. Phil Dampier and Lady Colin Campbell join me next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
As a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamonn Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamonn. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamonn Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In between the vicious attacks on his family, Prince Harry shared a lot of personal and sensitive material and memoirs spare. But the unnecessary revelation that's landed him on hot water the most was this Taliban kill count brag.
I could always say precisely how many enemy combatants I'd killed, and I felt it vital never to shy away from that number. Among the many things I learned in the army, accountability was near the top of the list. So, my number, 25.
Harry has rightly faced plenty of criticism for those grotesque revelations, with Army chiefs saying he's selfishly putting the lives of his fellow soldiers in danger. And now the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, has extraordinarily echoed that condemnation.
Boasting about tallies, or talking about tallies, does two things. It distorts the fact that the army is a team game. It's a team enterprise. For an infanteer to go over the top, that person is supported by hundreds of people behind them. It's a team, and so it's not about who can shoot the most or who doesn't shoot the most. And I think if that's just my personal view, if you start talking about who did what you're actually doing is letting down all those other people.
To react to this sensational intervention from a cabinet minister, I'm joined by my royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier. Lady C, wow. I mean, this is Ben Wallace, one of the most respected cabinet ministers of his time, lashing out at Harry. It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Well, you know, I was a few weeks ago in a country house party with one of the former heads of the army, and he was telling me that Harry's confession, boast, whatever you want to call it, is such a breach of protocol, and it is so outrageous, and it opens up the army to all sorts of accusations of inhumanity, etc., all of which are unfounded. But Harry has to sell a book. He has thrown all of the army under a bus. And I know that the army has been tremendously upset about it, because not only did this senior ranking army officer tell me, but I've heard it from more junior army officers as well. It's what he has done is such a betrayal of the protocols governing our military life. You can't exaggerate how serious this is.
Phil Dampier, it's a big deal, isn't it, for the Defence Secretary currently dealing with a war to decide to weigh in on a member of the royal family?
Yeah, I slightly differ, Dan. Good evening. I'm not sure it was wise for Ben Wallace to particularly bring this up now. I mean, he was asked the question, and he's quite a straightforward guy, as politicians go, and he gave a straightforward answer. And I'm sure he's reflecting what he's been told by a lot of people in the armed forces, that they are very upset with what Harry said. And some of the points he made are quite right. But I don't think King Charles will be particularly pleased that this has raised its head again. I mean, I think he would probably hope that things are starting to die down after Harry's book. And he's now very much looking forward to the, trying to organise the coronation and decide what to do about whether Harry's invited and Meghan is going to come. So, I can understand him expressing his opinion, but I don't think it's particularly helpful to bring it all up again, and just at a time when it was dying down.
It's certainly not helpful timing for King Charles, because Harry will be absolutely ropeable about this. Absolutely ropeable. Now, look, the other big royal story today, Lady Susan Hussey, trusted servant to the late Queen Elizabeth the Great for 62 selfless years, has made a sensational return to the royal fold after King Charles and Prince William really sort of threw her under the proverbial bus at the behest of anti-royal race-baiting activist Ngozi Fulani. Princess Anne boldly ignored the woke mob by asking Lady Hussey to stand in for her at Dame Frances Campbell Preston's memorial service at the Royal Hospital in Chelsea on Tuesday. Now, Lady C, what does this show? What does this show? Does it show that this is the royal family conceding that they were far too quick to judge when it came to Ngozi Fulani, who we know has a lot of issues around her credibility?
Well, yes, but you need to remember that when the announcement regarding Susan Hussey was made, this was in a very tight timeline after Marlene Headley, posing as Ngozi Fulani, made her accusations, and before the Earthshot Prize. And my understanding is that to salvage the Earthshot Prize and not have a repeat of William and Catherine's visit in Jamaica, where, something that was supposed to be positive became a whole big political mess because of race baiters and race baiting, that Susan Hussey did the decent and the honourable thing and allowed them to let her superficially fall on her sword, but that they were always going to maintain relations with her. And remember, she stayed at Sandringham. She's been to church with the king. She has, and I made the point at the time that she was never going to be dropped privately, that this was a way of salvaging a tremendously
But I don't like
situation.
that, Phil. I don't like that. I don't think we should throw people under the bus to appease the woke mob, especially not when they have given loyal service, by the way, for free over decades and decades.
No, I think Princess Anne was actually horrified when this whole thing blew up in the first place. And I think it's very significant that she's the person who's brought her back doing a job representing her at a funeral. I know that she contacted her after it happened and told her to, supported her. So I think it's very good that Anne has come out and made a public, made something public that she's able to come. What amazes me is the fact that she's actually willing to come back and do something. I think most of us, the way that she was treated, would say, well, forget it, I'm not interested.
Go and do one. No, very good point. She's a good woman.
It shows what a wonderful woman she is.
It does. It really does, and she is, and that's what we all found out. And it really exploded, I think, in the face of Ngozi. Look, I quickly want to talk about this. Meghan's old blog posts are continuing to come back to haunt her and destroy this manicured sort of victim image that she's manufactured for herself. And in a Father's Day message from 2014, it's emerged that Meghan praised her supposedly selfish and horrible dad, Thomas, for working 75-hour weeks and tirelessly devoting himself to her future. This is worth listening to, isn't it, Lady C? She wrote, I think of so many moments with my dad, our club sandwich and fruit smoothie tradition post my tap and ballet classes, which, by the way, he religiously took me to on Saturday mornings after working 75-plus-hour weeks as a lighting director. The blood, sweat and tears this man invested in my future so that I could grow up to have so much. Oh, Lady C, her own words yet again come back to haunt her and reveal the truth.
My darling Dan, you might have forgotten, but you read my book, and I said in my book 3 years ago that what she did to her father was going to come back to bite her, because what she had said in The Tig and The Working Girl was absolutely the opposite, and that she had committed two cardinal errors. One was she had thrown her father under the bus, and two, she had put too much of her personal life, feelings, experiences into the public domain on those blogs, and that they would come back to bite her because one thing completely disagreed with the other. And 3 years later, everybody's finally waking up to the fact that, yes, every word out of her mouth now is contradicted by a word out of her mouth in the past. The woman has absolutely no credibility whatsoever. She is a pathological liar who simply cannot get her story straight and will say anything to create an opportunity for herself to make more money or trash people who are going to interfere with her narrative. She is a total disgrace to humanity, and I don't know how anybody could ever believe anything that she has to say ever again.
I mean, the thing is, Phil, family is so important. I mean, at the top of the show tonight, I had my family in. I love them so much. They are everything to me. Nothing would ever come between me and my mum or my dad or my sister. And what's so sad is that Meghan admitted how amazing her dad was. She only turned on him after she became famous because she was embarrassed by him. And I think Lady C's right. That says so much about her character, doesn't it? Or are we being too harsh, Phil?
No, I think it's extremely sad. The saddest thing about this whole Harry and Meghan thing is the way she's treated her father, I think. I mean, especially as he's been ill. You may remember last week, Dan, I made reference to the fact that Meghan worked at the US Embassy in Buenos Aires, and that prompted Samantha Markle to actually get in contact with me. And she said that, in fact, she was on an internship, and that was actually paid for by her father. So that's yet another example of how he was trying to support her in her career. And for Harry to now say that, she no longer has a father and just completely ignore him, even though he's just a few miles down the road in Mexico, and still not want to make it up with him, I mean, it's very, very sad indeed. And I just don't know if that's ever going to change. But as Lady C says, she's made so many lies about it in the past, and she always used to praise him for her success.
Fascinating. You two are the best. So much insight as ever from Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier. And we'll speak when I'm back from my little break. Thank you both so much. But coming up, as Good Morning Britain's Adel Ray insists that Shamima Begum has been treated differently because she is not white British. Is he right? Or is this just more sort of race baiting from the MSM? My superstar panel have their say on that, plus the first of tomorrow's newspapers' front pages too. But first, as former PM Boris Johnson makes a huge intervention to stop the Brexit betrayal, could Fishy Rishi be gone before the next election if he fails to heed his warning? Well, former Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe, and of course an ex-Brexit Party MEP, significantly too, is going to join me on this straight after the break.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Jacob Rees-Mogg on the way at home And up close. But it's time now for Big Witty Style with former Tory minister and ex-Brexit Party MEP Anne Widdecombe. And Boris Johnson made a major intervention on Brexit tonight, urging the Prime Minister to stick with the current Northern Ireland Protocol.
Northern Ireland Protocol, you've always said that you would always support your successor. Will you support any deal that he does on Brexit and Northern Ireland?
Well, you know, I think the best thing is to continue with the Northern Ireland bill that we agreed, and it's a very good bill, and doesn't set up any other problems in the economy of the whole island of Ireland. So I'd go with that one.
The move by Boris, who still hopes to replace Fishy Rishi, comes amid the continuing threat of ministerial resignations if his negotiations with Brussels permanently jeopardise Northern Ireland's place in the Union, including this not-so-subtle hint from true Brexiteer Home Secretary Suella Braverman during her exclusive interview with our very own Liam Halligan.
I know that the Prime Minister is absolutely committed to resolving this issue, regardless of the implications. It's absolutely essential that we get Stormont back up and functioning, that we restore free-flowing trade across the Irish Sea, so that businesses in Northern Ireland and Great Britain can carry out their commercial activities, but also that Northern Ireland's place within the UK is safeguarded.
Is Sunak waking up? Maybe. He said MPs would get a say on the final deal. But Anne Widdecombe, to me, from everything that I'm hearing from speaking to Brexiteers within the Tory party, it doesn't feel like Sunak actually respects them anymore. He's prepared to ignore the ERG. He's prepared to ignore the DUP. What's going on, Anne?
Well, we've had a series of Prime Ministers, including Boris, whose attitude has been pretty well summed up as any deal will do. You know, any deal will do. Whereas, in fact, we said very clearly, or the Conservatives said very clearly in their manifesto, that Britain would leave the EU as one united kingdom. Now, that has been broken by leaving Northern Ireland in the single market, by creating a border between us and Northern Ireland, which should be unthinkable. And none of it was necessary. Now, unless Rishi simply says to the EU, look, nothing doing, no ECJ interference, no border down the Irish Sea, we'll do the whole thing with technology on the existing border and won't create a hard border, unless he says all of that, so that we can give state aid to Northern Irish industries if we want to, so that we can trade as freely with them as we would trade with the Isle of Wight. Until we can do all of that, we haven't got a proper Brexit. And nobody wants to sign up to yet another round of something that isn't going to work because the DUP won't accept it and because it's not Brexit in anything but name. And the impact on the Conservatives will be enormous because once again they'll break down in angry division. And frankly, I think the public's had enough of it.
Well, we have. We absolutely have. But, Anne, this is what I'm asking you from a political point of view. Why does Sunak not understand that? I thought he was meant to be a smart man. I mean, what's he not getting? Surely this would put his premiership on the line.
Well, what he's not getting is that the EU will not be content with anything that doesn't punish us for having the effrontery to leave. I mean, that is the baseline of it. I mean, in 2017, the EU itself said, you know, we didn't need a hard border. We could manage with technology. Well, that's what we should have been working on ever since. There is this urge to placate the EU. We do not need to placate the EU. When we joined them as the EEC all those years ago, they accounted for a huge portion of global trade. Now that's down to about 8%. You know, we do not need to placate them. We do not need to get on our knees to them. We need to tell them, get out of Northern Ireland. That's what we need to tell them.
No, indeed. And can you believe we're here? I mean, look, you actually left the Conservative Party because you were so concerned about the fact that they were going to undermine Brexit. We thought those dark days of Theresa May were over. How is the Conservative Party back here?
Well, it's almost unbelievable. I mean, first of all, the Remainers didn't accept the result of the referendum.
No,
now,
they never did.
If Boris had built on the strength that he undeniably had when he first was elected and came in with a huge majority, promised to get Brexit done. If he'd then maximised the strength that he had and got a proper Brexit, we wouldn't be where we are now. But, you know, any deal will not do.
No, it won't.
Only the right deal will do.
It
Only the
won't.
right deal will do.
Wise
And
words.
it's right,
Hope Sunak is listening to Anne Widdecombe. And thank you so much. But coming up, as he prepares to launch his brand new show on this very channel, Monday night, Jacob Rees-Mogg gives me his most personal interview ever from the comfort of his own home. You won't want to miss this, coming up in just a few minutes. Also on the way, as ITV's Adel Ray suggests Shamima Begum has been harshly treated due to not being white British. Do you agree, or is he just looking for excuses? My superstar panel have plenty to say on this one. They're back in just 2 minutes' time.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, as soft touch Sunak plans to fast-track 12,000 immigration applications, including those who arrived illegally on small boats, does this prove that the public's concern over the invasion of our southern border is falling on deaf ears? Fleet Street icon Calvin McKenzie calls the move an amnesty in all but name. He's uncancelled later this hour. After a UK publisher censored the beloved works of Roald Dahl, we have new anti-woke Queen Camilla, who will not stand for these literary authoritarians.
Please remain true to your calling, unimpeded by those who may wish to curb the freedom of your expression or impose limits on your imagination.
Yes, Camilla, so is she right to go up against the woke mob, including Harry and Meghan, by the way, by making an impassioned defence for free speech? That's the big debate with my superstar panel. Tonight, I'm joined by Dominic Samuels, Sean Bailey and Amy Nicole. On the eve of joining GB News, one of the country's most unique and irrepressible political leaders gives his most personal interview ever.
Children have me wrapped around their little finger.
Do they?
Absolutely. I give him.
So you're the soft dad?
I give him the whole time, yes.
And does she need to be the authoritarian?
No, Nanny gives in almost as quickly as I do.
Does Eleanor?
There's not much.
You are invited inside the residence of Jacob Rees-Mogg. It's the top Tory as you've never seen him before, coming up in just a few moments. In the media bars, as ITV's leading race baiter Adel Ray says that it's a fact that Shamima Begum would be granted return if she was, quote, white British, does the terrorist skin colour really have a bearing on the courts? We're going to discuss that. What I describe as an outright lie next. And in tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass, our local councils guilty of green tyranny in their plan for 15-minute cities. The first front pages will arrive in mere moments too, right after Aaron Armstrong with the news headlines.
Good evening, Aaron Armstrong here in the GB newsroom. The United Nations has overwhelmingly chosen to isolate Russia, condemning its invasion of Ukraine and demanding the withdrawal of its troops. The non-binding resolution called for Russia to end hostilities and for lasting peace in Ukraine. China abstained amid suggestions it's considering supplying lethal weapons to Russia. President Volodymyr Zelensky says Ukraine will hold Moscow to account for the terror, killings and torture. He's due to meet Western leaders virtually tomorrow ahead of a new wave of sanctions against Russia. Meanwhile, several nations are holding vigils this evening in tribute to Ukraine to mark tomorrow's one-year anniversary of the start of the war. The Eiffel Tower lit up in the colours of the Ukrainian flag. In Brussels, the European Union building did the same. And in London, hundreds of people gathered in Trafalgar Square, where the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, has been praising the strength of the Ukrainian people.
Thank you for everything you have done to fight not only for your freedom, but for all our freedoms in Europe. For all of you here from Ukraine, the bravery of your countrymen and women who have stood against this aggression, this illegal war, this a challenge to freedom, democracy and human rights, should be incredibly proud of what you're standing for. And also we should remember all those people who've already given their lives for your wonderful country.
3 men have been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder following the shooting of a high-ranking officer in Northern Ireland. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell was targeted by 2 masked men while with his son at a sports centre in Omagh last night. He is in a critical but stable condition in hospital. Police say dissident group the New IRA is the primary focus and they are reviewing the threat level. Former Hollywood film producer Harvey Weinstein's been sentenced to 16 additional years in prison after being found guilty of rape and sexual assault in Los Angeles. Weinstein is already serving a 23-year sentence for a separate conviction in New York, which is under appeal. The jury in the Los Angeles case convicted Weinstein on charges against a single victim known as Jane Doe, who says the incident happened when he appeared uninvited at her hotel room during a film festival in 2013. The film mogul maintains the allegations against him were a setup. TV online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News, but now it is back to Dan Wootton tonight.
Time for tomorrow's news tonight now in our Media Buzz. The first front pages are in, and The Independent focuses on the estimated 100,000 civilian deaths since Putin launched his bloody invasion of Ukraine, with the one-year anniversary of the start of the war just hours away. Heroes never give in is the headline in the Metro, as they too lead with the terrible anniversary. The Ukrainian flags pictured honoured the nation's dead at a cemetery in Kharkiv, as Ukraine still stands defiant. My superstar panel back with me now, the political commentator Dominique Samuels, former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey and the author and broadcaster Amy McCall. Now, it may have been our state broadcaster, the BBC, that launched a sick rehabilitation campaign for Shamima Begum, but much of the rest of the lefty MSM is now joining in. Yesterday, former Home Secretary and British Pakistani Sajid Javid welcomed Begum losing her appeal to re-enter the UK. But woke ITV presenter Adel Ray lashed out, saying, "Our parents made huge sacrifices and worked tirelessly to earn British citizenship. Some lost their lives in war fighting for our rights, yet many have never been accepted. Today, you have helped make that citizenship conditional. Today, we are not all the same. It's tragic, Sajid." But then this is where he really took it too far. He said, The fact is, if Shamima Begum was white British, she'd be here facing court. But because she has Bangladeshi parents, she is no longer considered British. I thought we kids of immigrants were required to be more British, not less, even in the eyes of the law and justice system. Now, Ray was rightly called out for his deliberate race-baiting and for missing the glaring example that proves him wrong. Jihadi Jack, a white Brit, radicalised terrorist who was stripped of his citizenship in 2019 because he was entitled to a Canadian passport. So is Begum, a proven terrorist, really treated differently because she isn't white British, Dominique Samuels?
Well, obviously not. And the people that seem so desperate to revert to this easy race-baiting tactic are probably really averse to the actual facts. So we've actually been able to remove citizenship since 1914, and it's part of the British Nationality and Status of Aliens Act. It's also part of the British Nationality Acts of 1981. And one of the caveats of that is that you can remove someone's citizenship for national security risks, acts of terror, or glorifying terrorism. The people that say, oh, you know, we've never done this before, we've actually removed people's citizenship 667 times from 2010 since 2021. And also in 2002, the removal of citizenship was actually extended to dual nationals under a Labour government. So for the people that want to scream and shout, you know, we've never done this before, it's racism, they probably need to have a look at the facts.
Yeah, it's fascinating, Sean Bailey, because I feel like there are so many people who look to turn things into an issue of race, Adel Ray being one of them, because I'm in exactly the same situation as Shamima Begum and Jihadi Jack. If I were to defect to a terrorist regime because I have dual nationality, I have a New Zealand passport as well as a British passport, I would fully accept that I would be stripped of my British passport. That's nothing to do with race. I am white British.
I think the point is he said it was conditional, and I think the condition the British government had to look at was this is a person who advocated for the murder of British citizens, and the government had a tough decision. They needed to send a message internationally. If you attempt to murder Brits, we will take steps to prevent that happening.
Which is perfectly legal, and there's plenty of precedent.
Look, the tough bit for Shamima, she was very young, and she was groomed and misled, lots of people tell you. But also, I think she was just about old enough to tell the difference between wrong and right. Should she have been in this country, she would have been
don't you?
tested.
I think that what Adel...
You're with Adel Ray.
Was getting at, which I think you know really, was he was getting at the fact that her dual nationality played a big part in how it was decided.
No. He turned this into an issue of race because he said that if she was white British, she would be allowed back. That is a lie. It's not a fact. It's a lie.
He tried to unpack then into saying how it was more to do with the dual nationality, leading to the fact that children of immigrants are held by different standards.
But that's something we...
I think that's what he was getting at.
But it's not true.
So in the same way Jihadi Jack was a dual national, that's why he was repatriated to Canada.
Yeah.
So a lot of
he is white,
a lot of
and he's
commentators, all he was saying is that it creates a two-tier system. Whereas if you have
it doesn't.
If you have British citizenship, you are safer than if you have dual nationality.
Yeah, but that's true. I actually don't disagree with that. I actually think that's true. But what isn't true is that it has anything to do with the colour of your skin.
Yeah, that's disingenuous. That's not what he was getting at. It was all about the status that you have if you are the child of an immigrant versus...
But I have that status. Do you not understand? If I were to go off to Syria and join ISIS, I would have to fully accept that I would not be allowed back into Britain. And if New Zealand wanted to take me, that would be up to them. That is nothing to do with the colour of my skin. And I would be treated the same as Begum.
But exactly. But you, Begum,
what do you mean exactly?
Sean, we all should be treated the same because she is British. She was born here. She has never been to Bangladesh. She is British.
Doesn't matter.
She has dual nationality by descent. That's really important. She has never even visited Bangladesh. So she is British and she should be treated as such.
Who cares?
That's all I'm saying.
The bottom line is
what's the long game? Where does she go? What's the rest of her life?
The bottom line is this. The bottom line is she was involved in an organisation that advocates heavily for the murder of British citizens. The government had to take action. This was an action that was legally available to them, so they took
I would like
action.
to say, why is she now Syria's problem? Why it's Syria?
But it's she isn't Syria's problem. problem because Syria. Hold on. No, Syria's decided she isn't a problem, and they'll have her because if she was a problem, they would seek to deport her as well. And they haven't done.
The Home Secretary has gone way beyond their powers.
We can have the debate about Shamima Begum, and we've obviously had the debate on this show about that before. What I am talking about now is a very clear and present narrative that ITV is trying to promote. Because I saw this from Adel Ray, and then I was sent a clip from the Peston show on ITV last night, hosted by Anushka Stana, who, in an interview with Tom Tugendhat, also tried to claim that this was an issue of race because she was British Indian. The point that I'm making is that this is not about race, because Jihadi Jack has also lost his citizenship. He is a white British, and if I were to do the same, I would also lose my citizenship as a white British man. It's not about race. So these race baiters should look at the facts.
And you can also have your British citizenship revoked, so it's not even just about that.
No, that is true. That is true.
It's about two categories: if you have committed fraud or if you're a threat to the UK's national security. And I think going off to join a terrorist death cult, claiming you had no regrets and referring to the Manchester bombing as tit for tat is a pretty good parameter for that.
It's simply resolved. All you need to go back through is the 600+ cases we've had since 2010 and see if that's all on race.
Of course. But look, I'm prepared for people to have the debate about Shamima Begum. There is a legitimate debate to have. You know my views on it are strong. But what there is not a legitimate debate to have is the fact that Adel Ray, who is an employed journalist by ITV on Good Morning Britain, said that this was a fact. It wasn't a fact. He should be disciplined for race baiting.
The real problem is that it makes communities here uncomfortable.
Right.
And he should think twice before doing that. Because
but he knows what he's trying to do.
But that's
he's trying to whip up hate, whip up outrage, all on the basis of things that aren't even factual. Because when you look at the facts, you see it's been done a lot.
But look, I want to move on because after witnessing the media pile-on against Kate Forbes for saying she doesn't support gay marriage, it was hardly surprising that her leadership rival, Humza Yousaf, then said that he felt the opposite. But that's despite the fact that Yousaf, a practising Muslim, suspiciously missed the key Holyrood vote on gay marriage in 2014. And when he was finally pressed on this socially conservative stance of his faith, his answer, well, it sounded strangely familiar.
I couldn't come on your programme in all sincerity and tell you that I'm able to change what Islam says about gay marriage or gay sex or what the mainstream Islamic view is. I couldn't. I would be lying to your viewers if I said that, you know, everybody will know what the position of mainstream Islam in that respect is. But the question is, well, do people use the basis of their faith as legislating? I haven't done so. I wouldn't do so because I don't believe that's the job of legislators or policymakers.
OK, so now try and spot the difference between that and what Kate Forbes said.
Do people use the basis of their faith as legislating? I haven't done so. I wouldn't do so.
But I will not roll back on any rights that already exist in Scotland.
So, will the MSM be sharpening their knives for this candidate as well? Or do they only do that to Christians? Amy Nicole, Sean Bailey, Dominic Samuels, do stand by because coming up, as Queen Camilla made an impassioned defence of free speech following a UK publisher censoring the beloved works of Roald Dahl, was she right to go up against the woke mob, including Harry and Meghan? My superstar panel will return to debate that soon. But next, on the eve of joining GB News, one of the country's most unique political leaders, Jacob Rees-Mogg, gives his most personal interview ever. It's the top Tory as you've never seen him before at his home. Coming up in just a few moments' time.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family. GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different.
It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. From next week at 8 p.m. every Monday to Thursday, the unique and irrepressible Jacob Rees-Mogg will provide a brilliant lead-in to this show. But before he gets started, I wanted to know more about the man behind the political caricature, so he invited me into his home to find out.
I thought I'd show you this.
Oh, yes, please.
I'm not sure it's easy to I might take it down to show you, because I'm rather pleased with this. This is a handkerchief with CR on it, because it belonged to Charles I, that was dipped in his blood. You can see very faintly the blood stains after his execution. By this
How did you
man,
come into that?
Colonel Penruddock, who was at the execution and did it, and then it came up at auction, if I remember rightly, in an auction in Gloucestershire a few years ago.
There were so many fascinating artefacts like that just dotted all around the house. But when we sat down, I asked JRM how he really feels about marriage, parenting, money, fashion, and whether his prime ministerial ambitions have really gone away.
Jacob Rees-Mogg, thank you so much for having me at your home. And I thought it was appropriate, actually, to do it this way, because you're going to be inviting our incredible GB News family to have you in their living room every night, Monday to Thursday. So now we're in your home. And I thought it was important actually to find out a little bit about the man behind what can be a political caricature, I guess.
Well, first of all, I'm very much looking forward to being with GB News, and very grateful to those people who are inviting me into their homes through nightly broadcasts. But actually, politically, I've never thought what is presented of me has been particularly inaccurate. I'm not much different in private from the public view.
So you feel you've always been a very honest broker in terms of what you present on a personal basis?
Well, people have put this to me before, and I think the answer is, would anybody have adopted my image out of a creation, a confection? I think that's very unlikely, so I'd better be what I really am.
So talk to me about what it was like going from that transition, a sort of avid bachelor, I guess, who for a long time had focused very much on business and making a fortune to set yourself up for life, to a husband and very quickly a dad of 6.
Well, I'm very lucky. I mean, I've got 6 marvellous children and lovely wife. What more could anybody ask for?
But you were careful, weren't you? You were careful because I was looking into.
I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, I was looking into some of your early interviews, and you made the point that you wanted to be certain that the woman who you settled down with was the one, because you didn't want a woman who was going to end up running off with your fortune.
Well, I can't think of, I don't have much of a fortune, but I think that everybody wants that degree of certainty.
So how did you know? How did you know?
Well, it's just good luck, and things worked. Good fortune.
And she was a journalist, or is a
That's
journalist?
right. That's right. She was.
And so, did you connect on an intellectual basis?
No. We were introduced by my sister, Nunziata, who's also been on GB News.
Yes, I know her well.
Introduced me to Helena, and we started talking. And I'm afraid I mainly talked about Helena's ancestor, Thomas Wentworth. And Helena thought, who's this rather odd fellow who knows more about my family history than I do?
So, 6 children. You believe in a traditional upbringing, and one of the most fascinating sides, I guess, of your family life is the fact that your nanny, who I believe is 80 years old now, was also your nanny growing up. So she has remained in the family.
She's remained in the family for, jolly nearly 60 years now. I think 57 years. So no, it's an amazing lifetime that she's been with our family, and this has been marvellous for my children. When you say traditional, I think indulgent actually is probably the more accurate word.
You're lucky.
My children have me wrapped around their little finger.
Do they?
Absolutely. I give in.
So you're the soft dad?
I give in the whole time, yes.
And does she need to be the authoritarian?
No, Nanny gives in almost as quickly as I do. There's not much.
So that's funny, because I think some people might have thought that you were the strict one.
No, I give in straight away before being asked, really. I'm a complete pushover.
You love being a dad?
Oh, enormously, yes. It's wonderful, and I love seeing my children grow and develop. It's very exciting. It's so interesting as well.
Harriet Harman once called you a deadbeat dad because you admitted that you had never changed one of your children's nappies.
Yes, but she's entitled to her opinion.
How did you feel about that?
I couldn't give tuppence about it. That people say things in politics, and one shouldn't worry about them at all.
Do you think it's important for mothers and fathers to play traditional roles in the upbringing of their children?
No, I wouldn't want to tell other families how to operate their family. That's a matter for them. But I think family is very important. I think it's very important for the happiness and growth of children and a stable background. All the evidence suggests that a stable background for children helps their development.
And your children are impeccably presented, aren't they? Like you, always very well dressed. Do you sometimes look around at where we're at in society in 2023 and worry?
I'm very positive about society, and actually my children dress as they want to dress. So some of them dress more formally than others. They're individuals, and so they're not, except when they're obviously very little, forced to wear things that they don't want to wear. It's really a choice for them.
You're famous for your sartorial standards. Talk to me about that. I mean, how many suits do you have, Jacob, double-breasted suits?
Well, I mean, I've got more than 2, but I basically only got 2. I've got a dark blue one and a dark grey one, and one time it's one time it's the other.
Do you ever dress down?
No, I don't. But my clothing is very boring. It's not particularly a sartorial style. It is just, as I say...
So you don't own a pair of jeans?
What would I do with a pair of jeans?
Sneakers? Trainers?
No, I've got a pair... Somewhere else, I've got a pair of green flash shoes, which I occasionally put on if my children bully me into playing cricket with them. But I've also got a very ancient pair of cricket boots that I had since I was at school, which I managed to get out last summer when I played in the Blagdon Fathers against the under-11s.
And is that the only exercise you take, sport, or do you...
Oh, you know, I'm not a great one for taking exercise, no.
And so do you watch what you eat?
Not particularly, no. But I don't... I hope I'm not a glutton.
Now talk to me about growing up, because of course you were born into a life of great privilege. Your father, the editor of The Times, the newspaper of record, of course, hugely influential now, but back then on a different scale. So you really had every opportunity, didn't you, to be a success?
Oh, I've been very fortunate, but the key good fortune was to be born into a loving family. And I think that's the essence of what has helped me through my life, is that supportive family. And as I was saying earlier, we know how valuable that is to everybody. So yes, indeed, there were other advantages, and my father being editor of The Times, we constantly met interesting people, and that was a great privilege. But actually having that stability of a loving family is, I think, fundamental and something that society ought to do more to help.
I agree. You were a political animal, though, from a very young age. Some of that must have been from your dad, surely.
Oh, of course. The main topic of conversation at home was politics. It was my father's great interest, and we might talk about other things for a little bit, but almost always conversation would get back to politics.
What do you think about the Scottish nationalist?
Well, he lost his deposit.
Do you think that that's a good thing?
Yes, I do. I don't approve of the Scottish nationalists.
My father had a great quality, which is that he was always interested in his children's view. So that if we were discussing politics, he would want to know what his children thought.
It sounds to me like you were always very determined to get financial security early in your life so that you would then be able to pursue your interest in politics.
I think that assumes too great a structure. I think things happen more by chance than by long-term planning or design.
Do you think it's gauche when people talk about how much money you made?
People talk about what they like, it's not my business.
But of course you were, after that time, pretty much set for life, weren't you? You didn't have to work another day in your life if you didn't want.
Everyone has to work, and that's what life is about. I mean, I think this idea that you can just rest on your laurels is false.
But it did give you the ability to commit to politics.
I wouldn't overstate the importance of a city career, and things I've read about my own situation are always massively exaggerated.
Really?
So I wouldn't take those seriously either.
Did you feel it was your destiny to be a Tory MP?
Destiny is overstating it. It was certainly something I wanted to do, and I felt it was very important to persevere, that, you know, you don't get what you want the first time, you keep on going.
Do you still want to be Prime Minister, deep down?
No, I'm supporting the Prime Minister we've got. I want Rishi Sunak to make a success of it. I mean, I was a great supporter of Boris Johnson, and thought it was a terrible mistake to get rid of him. But I think the Tory party must not change leader again. I think that would be a recipe for electoral
But
failure.
you're young, Jacob. You're 53, aren't you? And back when you were much, much younger, you said you would be happy to be Prime Minister by the age of 70.
Well,
so you've got another 17 years.
I think that was an interview I gave when I was about 12 or something. So that was quite a long time ago. I wouldn't...
So there genuinely is no burning ambition to lead the Conservative Party one day? I fully appreciate that right now there is a leader.
No, what I'm looking forward to is my programme on GB News.
Was the night of the Brexit referendum victory the best in your political career?
Oh, it was the most exciting in my political career, yes.
What's been the most exciting day of your life?
Well, everything of that kind revolves around family, and the birth of children is, I mean, the most remarkable thing that ever happens. This sudden creation of the appearance of new life is really very wonderful.
And don't miss Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation here on GB News every Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. from next week. But coming up in Uncancelled, as Soft Touch Sunak plans to fast-track 12,000 immigration applications, does this prove that the public's concern over the invasion of our southern border is falling on deaf ears? Calvin McKenzie calls the move an amnesty in all but name, and he's up very shortly. But next, in the media buzz, Queen Camilla made an impassioned defence of free speech following a publisher censoring the beloved works of Roald Dahl. Was she right to go up against the woke mob, including her own relatives, Harry and Meghan? My superstar panel return to debate that straight after the break.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
So it's time to return to tomorrow's news tonight now in our Media Buzz. More front pages then, and the Daily Mail leads with the Queen Consort Camilla telling writers not to let anyone curb their freedom of expression at a Clarence House reception today. Daily Express also reports on that story, which we are going to be talking about in just a moment. But let them eat turnips is the headline in the Daily Mirror, as the newspaper, I think, quite unfairly pokes fun at Therese Coffey, who sparked ridicule, according to them, by telling people to eat turnips to combat the fruit and vegetable shortage. More in the Media Buzz now with tonight's superstar panel, though. Political commentator Dominique Samuels, top Tory Sean Bailey and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicole. Now, as I just mentioned, the rewriting of Roald Dahl's classic children's books by woke sensitivity readers has divided grown-ups around the world this week, forcing the publisher Puffin, the weak publisher Puffin, by the way, the pathetic publisher Puffin, to defend their decision by insisting that they have a significant responsibility to protect young readers and that the hundreds of changes were minimal. No, they weren't. Unfortunately, Puffin's attempts to defend their book butchering doesn't seem to have reached Clarence House. Yes, with the Queen herself wading into the row earlier today. I honestly let out a little whoop for Camilla when I saw this.
Please keep doing so, and please remain true to your calling, unimpeded by those who may wish to curb the freedom of your expression or impose limits on your imagination. Enough said.
Yes, guys, we have an anti-woke queen. And look how proud the king was. I mean, look, it's incredibly rare for members of the royal family to involve themselves in these sorts of culture war squabbles. But maybe that highlights how seriously the country is taking Puffin's rewriting of literary history. It also sets up our new anti-woke queen head-to-head with the Prince and Princess of Wokery, Harry and Meghan. And I think I know what side I'll be taking. But was the Queen Consort right to weigh in? And, Sean, do we actually need more public figures who are going to stand up for free speech after this disgrace from Puffin?
I think if you see the Queen's comment, she was clever enough not to wade right into the middle of it, but it's actually important.
She knew what she was doing, though. She said enough said, and it's been briefed out to journalists.
Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why it's important. No matter which side of the debate you fall on, what made this country great was freedom of expression, the right to speak in a way in which you wanted to speak. It's very important. And this monoculture that people are trying to design and change our history is actually damaging to the communities they think they're defending. And for the Queen to gently make the point, look, don't let anybody stop your freedom of expression, is very important, because the only reason people are cancelled is because only one side of the debate is accepted.
This is ridiculous. Nobody's been cancelled, and if there's anyone that
Roald Dahl's words have been cancelled, Amy. They have.
They haven't, Sam.
There have been hundreds and hundreds of changes.
Yes, books get edited. You get edited. I get edited.
No. There is no right to edit a dead author's work.
That's cancellation.
Well, there is. If they're not going to sell.
It's Orwellian. Do you not understand
that? Oh, goodness, it's Orwellian.
How are they not
editing a book? You know, we're not going to round up all the books, burn them and do a
do you know anything about... Amy, look, give me a second. Do you know anything about Roald Dahl?
Do I know anything about... Yes, I know it was very unpleasant. I know it was anti-Semitic. I know he was known as Roald the Rotten by his own wife.
Do you also know that he is probably the greatest children's author of all time?
That's because none others are allowed to look in.
He was incredibly focused on the minutiae of every word in his book, and these scumbags who are editing him are actually destroying literature and society and rewriting history.
This is just another excuse for you to scream woke mob. You have a newfound sentimentality, Roald Dahl, that makes no sense.
You've missed the point. It's not if you agree. It's not if you agree with what's in the book. It's the rewriting of the book. That's where
it's not rewritten. It's edited. You can still get all the other versions.
Let Dominic speak.
The point is, it's his book. If you want to pick apart words and make them all flowery and woke, despite the fact that his work has sold 300 million copies worldwide, and personally for me, it was his books that actually got me into reading. If you want to make a woke version, write your own books. Don't start picking apart other people's talent because you don't have any of your own.
Puffin doesn't need to protect kids from anything. Puffin does not need to protect kids from anything.
Shall we see what Puffin was protecting kids from? So instead of, in James and the Giant Peach, instead of cloud men, we've got cloud people. Do kids need to be protected from cloud people.
What's really
Doesn't make any
interesting
sense.
is nothing new that the books have been edited. So in 1971 they were edited
by Roald Dahl when he was still alive.
By his publisher.
It was when he was
by
still
his
alive.
publisher.
He
And
approved
guess what?
the changes to the Oompa Loompas.
But would you know that the public reaction at the time was very similar to what we're seeing over these edits?
You know
People
why?
do not
It was
like
a thin
change.
end of the wedge. The public saw it was a thin end of the wedge.
And they saw that it's a slippery slope, which we saw. Look, originally in 1971, it was about the depiction of the Oompa Loompas as African pygmies, which is a fair point. But at the same time...
And Roald Dahl agreed to it. And the thing is what this is actually about, it's so disturbing to me, because it's the sanitisation of our culture. It's the fact that it's like we can't use the words black, we can't use the words white in any context. That is ludicrous.
These are commercially driven changes.
I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn.
They're
ideologically driven. Hold on.
Roald Dahl fan, which
Yes, I am.
I've never heard about before, but you are this
Well,
week.
you could have asked my mum earlier, because I read every single book.
But would you rather they stay in print then?
No.
And they
No.
are...
I will be buying first edition Roald Dahls. And how disturbing that we now live in a... No, I'm serious. That we now live in a culture... I mean, the price, I imagine, is shot up. That we now live in a culture where we cannot even guarantee that if we buy a Roald Dahl on our corporately controlled damn Kindle or on our corporately controlled Amazon, that we're actually getting Roald Dahl's words.
It isn't just happening to Roald Dahl books. This is happening in universities.
Of course, it's happening everywhere.
It's happening everywhere.
And you know what? Do not underestimate this very significant intervention from the Queen today.
Can I say one thing about that?
Yeah, you can.
She didn't mention censorship. She didn't mention Roald Dahl. She spoke very vaguely about free speech.
Amy,
she could have been talking about you.
Amy.
She could have been talking about
the Queen
anything.
knew exactly what she was doing. It has been briefed to journalists. She was referring to Roald Dahl. It was a significant intervention backed up by King Charles. And you know what? I actually have a bit of hope today. A bit of hope that we have an anti-woke Queen. And that is what we need, especially given the disgrace of her stepson. Amy Nicole, Sean Bailey, Dominic Samuels, do stand by, because coming up, a local council's guilty of green tyranny in their plan for 15-minute cities. Find out what one of my superstar panellists thinks about that in the crowning moment of the show as we reveal tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But next, in Uncancelled as soft touch, Sunak wants to fast-track 12,000 immigration applications, including those arriving in small boats. Does this prove that the government isn't taking the public's concern over the invasion of our southern border seriously? Fleet Street icon Calvin McKenzie calls the move an amnesty in all but name. He's up to explain why, straight after the break.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive, because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel. It's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Rishi Sunak facing more pressure tonight after it emerged that a new fast-track scheme for 12,000 asylum seekers, including those arriving on illegal small boats via the Channel, will be launched to try and clear the massive backlog. According to the Home Office, migrants from Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, Eritrea and Yemen will be granted refugee status after completing a single questionnaire, with the vast majority of cases bypassing the crucial interview process altogether. It's estimated that roughly 95% of the 12,000 claims will be granted based on current rates, allowing them to settle permanently in Britain and even sponsor relatives to join them. Well, Fleet Street legend Calvin McKenzie joins me now. Calvin, with policies like these, it's no wonder we're seeing so much anger in local communities, is it?
No. Look, so this is the issue. You're a smuggler. You're making quite a lot of money. You're making 50, 100,000 a boat. You just turn round to the migrants and say, don't take our word for it that you can come to the UK and you're going to get automatic asylum granted. Look at this and point to the front page of today's Times where they have leaked the details that you've just said. And honestly, I can see the numbers multiplying even this year by a couple. What is to stop everybody from Afghanistan, Eritrea, Libya, Yemen and beyond coming here once they read in there that basically the reason they was granted because they said that 95% of them would have been granted anyway. And the reason that they said that they were granting them was that, first of all, we can't afford the hotels. Oh, really? Agreed. Finally, they come round to our way of thinking. And secondly, we can do with the workforce in an environment where we don't seem to have enough people to do our jobs. Is that really the way forward? Are we going to invite the whole of Africa and the whole of the Middle East to come in? Come on down, and the smugglers, being the middleman in all this, will make an absolute fortune. We cannot afford this kind of policy, and nor do I agree with Sunak or the Tories. The Tories, by the way, by 22% of the poll, 50% Labour in the latest YouGov poll, a nightmare, right? Nor do I agree with them simply leaking it to the Times in order to, in some strange way, diffuse this. It doesn't diffuse this. It adds to the conspiracy that we have a government, whether it is Tory or Labour, who are actually working against the will of the people. If you said to ordinary people, they said, we're going to allow 12,000 in. By the way, all they have to do is fill in a questionnaire. Now, the questionnaire is in English. Quite a few of these people, the majority, won't be able to speak English. This means two things. Either a lawyer will fill it in, or a charity worker will probably fill it in. I don't believe that it will be filled in by a relative that's over here already. So there's a whole load of people whose vested interest is that for this to happen. The only people who's not in their interest is actually, strangely enough, the hotel owners who will actually lose out on some money. But this is, to my mind, a serious political mistake. But I am astonished that nobody seems as aggravated as I do about it all.
Well, the thing is, the public are, Calvin, we're seeing it. We're seeing it. And don't you feel like the disconnect between the Westminster establishment and the MSM and the public on this story is just getting greater by the week? They simply do not get it. They do not understand why we're mad.
Well, they don't understand the political ramifications in this respect. What happens to our, honestly, laughable NHS? What happens? Surely the volume grows, okay? What happens to our education system? Already, the teachers will be complaining the classrooms are bursting at the seam. What happens to our roads? What happens to our benefit system? What happens to any of this? None of that is factored in the financials, which are then shoved to us by a government that says, I'll tell you what the answer is. And by the way, this will be true of Labour as well. I'll tell you what the answer is. Disgracefully, a Tory government will say, we're upping our tax rates. Why? Because literally we've got too much public sector spending coming at us, in part because of the migrant issue. Why doesn't Sunak say, I'm going to stop this? We've got 160,000 now. If we had this conversation 3 years' time, GB News, your panel, all sitting here, what do you think that 160,000 is going to look like? Is it going to look like 500,000? Is it going to look like 1 million? At what point does it become an issue that seems to embolden politicians to say we're not going to put up with it?
I know, it's pathetic, but they're not. It's absolutely pathetic. Look, Calvin, just wanted to quickly ask you about this latest Gary Lineker political invention. So we had Shamima Begum barred from returning to the UK yesterday. So while folk like you and me were actually celebrating the news, the Beeb's golden boy, Gary Lineker, tweeted she was a child, manipulated and groomed. This feels very wrong.
Yeah,
Shouldn't
right.
that alone see the British
Gary
National
Lineker
Corporation tear up his contract?
Gets most of his money, about $1.5 million. Now he doesn't work for BT Sport, right? He makes $1.5 million out of licence fee payers. We have to pay this money, no matter whether we want to or not. Okay, so how does he have the right? Because he is famous as a BBC employee. Okay. He may claim he's to be a freelance. That, by the way, is now currently being tested by HMRC, which is what there's a battle going on in the background for £500,000 off him. So, it's not sure that he is actually a freelance at all. How is it that half of us, we'll say half of us, right? I reckon the number is probably 70% or 80% who don't agree with him. Why do we have to suck this up? And yet he gets paid in order to use his platform as effectively a BBC employee to push it at us, right? The reality is that Tim David said that he is going to get balance, right? That I don't blame Lineker for using his platform, if that's what he wants to do. But why doesn't he do it not on my money? He's funded by us.
I couldn't agree more. And he has made Tim Davie look like a weak fool, because Tim Davie said he was going to get tough. It didn't matter how big you were. It didn't matter what you did. And he has failed, and he's made Tim Davie look like a fool. But Calvin McKenzie, thank you so much. Calvin will speak when I'm back from my break. But it's time now to reveal tonight's greatest Britain and Union jackass. And my superstar panel are going to return for this, although we can only see Calvin at the moment. We will get them back very shortly. But can we hear Dominique Samuels?
Yes, you can.
OK, Dominique Samuels, who is your greatest Britain? There we go.
My greatest Britons are the protesters that took to Oxford over the weekend to protest against the imposition of low traffic / 15-minute neighbourhoods. Good on them.
Sean Bailey, your nominee.
My greatest Britain is the Queen Consort, who in a speech gave an impassioned defence of creativity and free speech to a group of authors and said they must stick to their guns. An important part of making this country great is free speech.
And Amy Nicole, your nominee.
So mine's an honorary this week. It's college swimmer from the US. Oh, great! Sorry, no, it's not. It's turnips.
What?
It's turnips.
OK, you've lost the plot. Move on. Look, there's only one winner for me today. There's only one winner. It's Sean Bailey. It's the anti-woke Queen, Camilla.
What about
Good
turnips?
on you, Camilla. Good on you for actually standing up for what the country thinks rather than loads of those weakling politicians. Union jackass time now. Dominique Samuels.
My union jackass is Oxford City Council for their tyrannical approach to these low-traffic neighbourhoods that nobody wants, and all of the other crackpots that advocate for these disgusting anti-democratic schemes.
Sean Bailey, your nominee.
My union jackass is Tony Blair, who's trying to inflict a digital ID on all Britons. This is something he failed to do when he was PM, and now he's trying to do it through the back door.
And Amy Nicole, your nominee?
Mine is Suella Braverman for not condemning the... Oh, my God, just turn it
What is
to
going
that.
on?
Amy, you've lost the plot.
I think Amy's the turnip at this
It's me. No, it's Therese Coffey for saying deal with the food
apparently it's because she said this. Let's have a look at what she said. Let's have a look at what she said.
But it's important to make sure that we cherish the specialisms that we have in this country. A lot of people would be eating turnips right now rather than thinking necessarily about aspects of lettuce and tomatoes and similar. But I'm conscious that consumers want a year-round choice, and that is what our supermarkets and food producers and growers around the world try to satisfy.
Thank you for that practical advice,
Let them eat
But look,
turnips.
today's Union Jackass is clearly
It's
the
me.
Oxford City Council for their push to 15-minute cities. Dominic Samuels, Sean Bailey, Amy Nicole, thank you so much for your company tonight. Thank you for being with me. I had my family with me. It was very exciting. I'm off for a couple of weeks to celebrate the big 4-0. Can you believe it? Every week. Dawn Neeson will be here on Monday. Good night.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join